My name is Margaret Vance now, though I was Margaret Cole when I stepped down off the stage at Two Forks, in the Montana Territory, in the April of 1884, with a carpetbag in one hand and my son's small cold fingers in the other. And Samuel was 5 years old that spring and had not spoken a single word in nearly 2 years. And I want to begin with his silence, because the whole of my life, and a good deal of another man's, turned on the morning somebody knelt down in front of that silent boy and did not once ask him to break it. His father had been a ferryman on the Missouri, a laughing, reckless man named Tom Cole that I married at 19 against my mother's judgment and never once regretted it. For he was kind under the recklessness, and he loved us. And he drowned when Samuel was 3 years old, going out in a spring flood after a stranger's runaway skiff that was not worth a nickel, let alone a life. And my boy was standing on the bank holding my skirt when the river took his father under and did not give him back. And Samuel had been talking that morning the way 3-year-olds talk, a bright, endless river of it. And he has told me since, grown, that he remembers deciding, in the way a small child decides a thing, without knowing he has decided it, that words were what you did while the world was safe, and the world was not safe anymore, and so he simply stopped. He was not deaf. The doctor in St. Joseph looked in his ears and down his throat and pronounced everything sound as a bell, and said, in that way doctors have of naming a mystery so it will hold still, that the grief had locked a door in the boy and only time held the key. And time went by, 1 year and then most of another, and the door stayed shut. I took in laundry and sewing, and I raised my silent boy in a rented half of a house that smelled of lye, and I watched him grow up watchful. That is the thing you must understand about Samuel, and it is the whole hinge of what I am telling you. A child who does not speak learns to watch the way other children learn to talk. And my boy could stand in a doorway and read a room the way a scout reads a trail. He saw everything. He missed nothing. He knew which neighbor was about to be unkind before her mouth had opened, and folks who did not know him took his stillness for simpleness, and I let them, because it was easier than the truth, and because I had learned by then that the world would rather believe a quiet child is empty than believe he is full of something too heavy to lift. And I was tired. I will not dress it up for you. By the winter I turned 26, I was tired in a way that sleep did not touch, and I began to be afraid, not of poverty, I had made my peace with that, but of dying worn out and leaving that watchful, silent child alone in a river town that thought he was simple. And it was fear for him and not for me that made me answer the notice. For a poor woman with a child is let to fight only one way, with a clean sheet of paper and 40 cents of stamps. The notice was in a marriage paper that a woman at the church put into my hands without a word, folded to the very line. So I have always thought she meant it for me. A rancher in the Montana Territory, 34 years of age, of temperate habits and settled means, holding a cattle ranch on the Two Forks bench, desired correspondence with a good and honest woman inclined toward marriage, and it was the last 2 lines that stopped my breath. For they did not say handsome and did not say young, they said, a widow considered without prejudice, and a child in the house would be welcome and not a burden, for the house is too quiet, and I am done living in a quiet house. I read that line, the house is too quiet, and I sat down on the edge of my bed with the paper shaking in my chapped hands, and I thought, here is a man asking the sky for noise. And I have got a silent boy, and if I answer him honest, I answer myself out of the only door that has opened in 2 years. So I wrote to him, and I was honest about a great deal. I told him I was a widow of 26, that my husband had drowned and left me a small son, that I could cook plain and sew fine, and doctor a fever and keep a house scrubbed to the bone, that I did not drink nor scold nor waste, and that I would come to the territory and keep faith with him if he would have me and the boy both. And every word of that was true, and I signed it, and I sealed it. And I did not write the one thing. I did not write that the boy did not speak. I told myself it was because such a thing wants telling face to face and not in ink. And there was truth in that. But underneath the truth was the plain cowardice of it. I was afraid that the word for a child who will not talk, written cold on a page to a stranger, would read as damaged, would read as simple, would read as exactly the burden he had promised the boy would not be, and he would fold my letter back up and choose some other woman with a chattering, ordinary child, and I could not risk it. So I gambled my honesty against my hope, and I sent the letter with half the truth in it. And that half-truth rode the wagons west ahead of me and waited at the end of the line to be paid for. His name was Gideon Vance, and his letters came back to me in a big, square, upright hand, careful and slow. A man who set down each word like he was laying a fence post, sure it would have to stand. He did not flatter me, and he did not press me. He wrote about the ranch, the long grass bench above the two forks of the creek that gave the town its name, the cottonwoods that went gold in October, the black cattle standing in snow like ink spilled on a page. And in his third letter he wrote the thing that decided me. He wrote, "I will tell you the truth of my quiet house so you come knowing it. I had a wife. Her name is not for a letter, but I loved her. And we had a little daughter, and 3 winters past the diphtheria came down this valley and took them both inside of 1 week, the child on the Tuesday and her mother on the Sunday. And I dug the 2 graves myself in ground still froze, because I could not abide to ask another man to do it. And I have lived since in a house where the clock is the loudest thing in it, and I am not writing you for a servant nor for a nurse. I am writing you because I have learned that a man can carry his own grief just fine and still be broke clean in half by the silence it leaves behind. And I would rather share a house than haunt one." I read that letter 100 times, and each time I came to the words, "a house where the clock is the loudest thing in it," I thought of my Samuel, and I thought, "Dear God, I am carrying to this grieving man the very silence he is trying to escape." And I nearly did not go, and then I thought, "No, I am carrying him a living boy. And a living silent boy is not the same as an empty house. And maybe, and I did not let myself finish the maybe, because hope that large will break your heart if you look straight at it. And I bought the tickets with money I had saved, a dime at a time in a tobacco tin, and I took my son's hand, and we went west. It is a long way from a Missouri river town to the Montana bench. Days of rail, and then 2 days of stage over country that got bigger and emptier and more beautiful the further we went. And Samuel sat with his face to the window the whole of it, watching. And once, crossing a high plain with the mountains standing up blue and enormous to the west, he reached over without a word and put his small hand flat against the glass as if he would touch the whole of that country, and it was the closest thing to speech I had seen from him in 2 years. And I turned my face away so he would not see me cry over it. We came into Two Forks on the second evening. 1 street of raw pine buildings with the mountains behind, and a cold, clean wind coming down off the snow. And I knew Gideon Vance the moment the stage stopped. A big raw-boned man with a weathered brown face and steady dark eyes and gray coming early at his temples, in a good coat bought new for the occasion, turning a gray hat around and around in his 2 big hands the way a nervous man will, and when I stepped down he took off the hat entire and said, "Mrs. Cole, I am Gideon Vance. You have come an awful long way, and I hope this country uses you kinder than the trip did." And then he looked down, and he saw the boy. And I felt the whole of my life balance on a knife in that second. And I did the coward's last thing. I said it fast to get ahead of it. I said, "This is Samuel, Mr. Vance. And there is something I must tell you before we go a step further." And my voice was shaking, and he looked up at me with those steady eyes, and he must have seen the terror in my face, because he said, "Gentle, then tell it, Mrs. Cole. A thing feared is always bigger in the dark." And so I told it, standing on the boards outside the depot with the cold wind pulling at my bonnet and my son's hand tight in mine. I said, "Samuel does not speak. He has not said one word since his father drowned near 2 years gone. The doctors find nothing wrong with his ears, nor his tongue. It is the grief that stopped him, and no man knows when or whether it will start him again. And I did not write it to you, because I was afraid you would read it as simple. And he is not simple. Mr. Vance, he is the furthest thing from simple that I know. But I could not risk the letter. And that was a dishonest thing in a woman asking you to trust her. And if you want to put us on the returning stage, I have earned it, and I will not make a scene. There is a stage back east on Fridays, I asked the driver. And Gideon Vance stood there in the last of the daylight, and he did not look at me while I said it. That is the thing I have loved him for across all the years since. He looked at the boy. The whole time. He kept his eyes on Samuel the way you keep your eyes, soft on a wild thing you do not want to spook. And when I was done, he was quiet a moment, and then he did not answer me at all. He crouched down, this big man, folded himself right down onto his heels on the depot boards so that his weathered face was level with my son's. And he did not reach for him, and he did not smile too big. He just looked at him honest, man to man, and he said, "Samuel, my name is Gideon, and I have got a house up on the bench that has been too quiet for 3 years, and I will tell you a secret about it. I do not need you to fill it up with talking. I have got a creek that talks all day and a whole lot of cattle with opinions, and none of it helps. What that house needs is a person in it, and you are a person. So you will do it good just by being under its roof. And if the day ever comes that you have got a word you want to spend, I will be right there to hear it. And if that day never comes, why, we will get on fine, you and me, in the quiet, because I have learned the quiet, Samuel. I speak it pretty near as good as you do." And my boy, who had not touched a stranger in 2 years, who flinched from the church women and hid behind my skirts from the kindest of them, my Samuel looked into that man's weathered face for a long, still moment, reading him the way he read everything. And then he took one step forward and laid his small hand flat against Gideon Vance's rough cheek, the way he had laid it against the stage window looking at the mountains. And Gideon closed his eyes, and I saw a tear go down into the gray stubble of his jaw. And he said, so quiet I barely caught it, "Well, all right then." And that was the whole of the courtship, right there on the depot boards. A silent boy and a grieving man agreeing to keep the quiet together. We were married 3 days later by the Two Forks preacher in the front room of the ranch house, and I will tell you about that house. It sat up on the bench above the joining of the two creeks with a long porch across the front of it and a lantern hung by the door. And Gideon lit that lantern the first evening I came, and I never once in all our years saw him let it go dark. And when I asked him why he burned oil on an empty road where no traveler came, he said a lit porch tells the whole valley there is somebody home who would be glad of company, and I have lived too long in a dark house to keep another one. He gave me and Samuel the 2 good bedrooms and took a cot in the tack room for himself. And he courted me after the wedding the way a wiser man would court a skittish mare, with patience and small kindnesses and no sudden moves. A jug of wild blue flag iris on the table, because he had noticed I stopped to look at them by the creek. And for Samuel, 1,000 patient hours. And this is the part I would have every soul in the world hear. Gideon Vance set out to win my son, not with gifts and not with games, but with work. He took that silent 5-year-old at his side every hour of the day. And he talked to him steady and easy, and never once required an answer, he would say. Now, Samuel, we are going to mend this stretch of fence, and I will hold, and you will hand me the staples. And the boy would hand him the staples, and Gideon would say, that is fine work. A man could not ask for a better hand. And he never made the silence into a wall, he made it into a room the two of them could live in. And inside of 2 months I would look out the window and see the big man and the small boy standing at the corral fence side by side. Not a word passing between them, just watching the horses in the evening light. Two people who spoke the same quiet language, and my heart would come up into my throat so I could not breathe. But a valley is not a ranch house, and Two Forks was 40 families, and a new bride is a thing to be looked over, and a silent child is a thing to be talked about. And there was in that town, as there is in every town on this earth, a woman who kept the tally, a Mrs. Pruitt, wife to the man who had the feed store, a hard, bright-eyed woman who wore her righteousness like a good coat, and it was Mrs. Pruitt who put the word about. That Gideon Vance, poor grieving soul, had sent away and got himself a widow with a simple child, a boy that could not so much as say good morning. Touched, she said, touched in the head, and it went round the way such things go round. And there were Sundays I brought Samuel to church, and felt the whole congregation performing its small pity at us. The sliding eyes, the two kind voices, pitched a little slow, as if the boy were deaf after all. And it near broke me. Not for myself, I was past caring what a town thought of me, but for him. Because he heard every word of it. My watchful boy, he heard them call him simple and empty and touched. And he could not say back to them the one true thing, which was that he was none of it. And Gideon, when I wept about it one night at the stove, did not tell me to pay it no mind. He took it serious, he said. Margaret, I will tell you a thing about this valley. They are good people, most of them. But a body that has never once been struck dumb by grief cannot imagine it. They think if a thing has no voice, it has no depth, and they are wrong. The deepest water in this whole country runs under the ground where you cannot hear it at all. And one day this valley is going to find out what is under that boy's quiet. And I would not trade 1 hour of him for a wagon load of children who never shut their mouths. And until that day comes, there will be supper at our house, and the lantern will be lit, and let them talk. And I held on to that. The deepest water runs where you cannot hear it. I held on to it through that whole first year, and I could not have known how exactly the valley would be made to learn it, nor what it would cost to teach them. It came the next spring, in the April of 1885, near a year to the day since I had stepped off the stage. And it came the way the worst things come out here, out of a blue sky. There was a mare Gideon set great store by, a good black mare heavy and full, and she was near her time and the weather had gone soft and warm, false spring. And then in one afternoon the sky in the northwest went the color of a bruise, and the temperature fell 40 degrees between dinner and dark. One of those late blizzards that the old-timers said could kill more stock in a night than a whole. Hard winter, and the wind came down off the mountains with snow in it going sideways, and Gideon pulled on his coat to go bring the mare and the near stock down into the shelter of the lean to by the creek before the worst of it hit. And Samuel, who was 6 now, and went nowhere the man did not go, pulled on his little coat too, and I near stopped him. I stood at the door with my hand on his shoulder and the snow already screaming past the porch, and Gideon said, "Let him come, Margaret. He will be at my side the whole while, and I will have him back before the dark is full." And I looked at my boy's face turned up to mine, watchful, certain. And God forgive me, and God bless me both. I let him go, and I stood in the lit doorway and watched the two of them walk out into the white with the lantern swinging in Gideon's hand until the storm swallowed them whole. An hour went by. The dark came down, and the storm did not slacken. It built. The wind so loud against the house it was like standing inside a drum, and I told myself they were forded up in the lean to waiting it out, that Gideon was too canny to try the walk back in a whiteout, and I lit every lamp in the house and hung the good lantern in the window, and I waited. And the second hour started, and I was pulling on my own coat to do the foolish deadly thing of going out into it myself, when the door burst open on the wind, and it was Samuel, my silent boy, alone, snow packed into his hair and his eyelashes, his little face gray-white with cold, one mitten gone, and no Gideon. And I went down on my knees in front of him and took him by the shoulders, and my heart was a stone falling down a well. And I said, "Samuel, where is he? Where is Gideon?" And my boy opened his mouth, and nothing came. 2 years and more of nothing, and I saw the whole terrible war of it go across his small face, the door that grief had shut and locked, and behind it the one thing in all the world he needed to say and could not. And I said, "Samuel, please, I know, baby, but I cannot help him if I do not know where." And my son gripped my arms with both his cold hands, and he set his whole small body to it like a boy trying to lift a wagon, and out of him, cracked and rusty and torn up from a place 2 years deep, came a word, one word, the first word in near a third of his life, and the word was, "Pa." And then, the door being open, the rest came after it in a flood, broke and gasping and half swallowed, but words, real words, he said. Pa fell, the ice, the creek, his leg, the log. He cannot, Mama, the water. And I understood. God help me, I understood all of it in an instant. The mare had gone down onto the creek ice, and Gideon had gone out after her, and the ice had given, and a drift log had come down on him in the water and pinned his leg, and he could not get himself out, and the cold was coming for him. And my 6-year-old son had watched it, the way he watched everything, and had understood that no amount of silence would save the man he had chosen for a father, and had done the one thing that 2 years of grief and a locked door had told him he could never do again. He had spent his voice. He had broke it open on the single word that could bring help. And then he had run a 1/4 mile through a killing blizzard in the dark to fetch me. I will not draw out the rescue longer than it wants. I wrapped Samuel by the stove and ran to the nearest neighbor, the Halversons, a 1/2 mile down the bench, and Ole Halverson and his 2 grown sons came with ropes and a plank and lanterns, and my boy, wrapped in a quilt and would not be left behind, rode on Ole's shoulder and pointed the way through the white to the bend in the creek, where a man's dark shape lay half in the black water with a log across his leg and the ice groaning around him, and Gideon Vance was 1/4 hour, the doctor said after, at the outside from being gone, and we got the log levered off and the ropes under his arms and hauled him out and up onto the plank and home. And it was a near thing and a long sickness after. The leg broke in 2 places, and the cold deep in him, and he lay fevered a week. But he lived. He lived because a silent boy found his voice in the one moment on this earth it was needed, and spent the whole of it on the word Pa. The valley learned it, the way Gideon said they would. There is no keeping a thing like that quiet in a town of 40 families. How the touched child, the simple boy, the empty one, had saved Gideon Vance's life with the first word out of his mouth in 2 years. And the Halversons told it, and it went round faster and further than ever Mrs. Pruitt's poison had gone. And the whole complexion of the town toward my son turned inside of a week. And I will give Mrs. Pruitt this. She did not hide from her share of it. She came up the bench herself with a crock of soup while Gideon was still fevered. And she was not a woman built for apologizing, but she made herself do it. She said, "Mrs. Vance, I named that boy of yours Simple in front of half this valley, and I have learned this week what was under his quiet, and I am ashamed." And then she looked at Samuel, who stood watching her the way he watched everything, and she said, "Young man, I was wrong about you, and I am sorry." And my son considered her a long moment, and then he said, out loud, in the cracked, rusty voice that was growing surer every day now the door was open, "That is all right, Mrs." And I thought the woman would go down on the floor. The words came back slow after that first night, some days a great many and some days only a few, as if he were spending from a purse he was still not sure of. But they came, and they never left again, and the first full sentence he ever gave me that was not about the rescue he gave me a month on, standing at the corral fence beside a mending Gideon who leaned on a crutch, when he looked up at the man and said, "When your leg is better, will you teach me to gentle a colt?" And Gideon Vance had to turn his face away to the mountains a while before he could answer him. We had a good long life, the 3 of us, and then more of us, for I gave Gideon 2 more children in the years that came, a boy and a girl, both of them loud as jaybirds from the cradle, and it was a joke in our house that they had come into the world to make up the noise their brother had banked, and Samuel grew up tall and easy and watchful still. For that never left him. He was always the one who saw the storm coming and the fence gone weak and the neighbor gone quiet with trouble, and he made a horsebreaker famous in 3 counties for his soft hand, and I always thought it was because he had spent 2 years learning that you did not need words to reach a frightened creature. You needed only to be still and patient, and to keep the quiet with it until it chose to trust you, which is, when you come down to it, the exact thing a big raw-boned rancher had done for a silent boy on the boards of a depot in the spring of 1884. Gideon went before me, as the men mostly do, an old man in his own bed with his family around him and the lantern lit on the porch outside the window. And near the end, when the words were getting hard for him, the way they had once been hard for Samuel, he took my hand and he said the thing I have carried like a coal in my 2 hands every day since. He said, "Margaret, the best bargain I ever made in my life I made blind. I sent away for a voice to fill my quiet house. And what came off that stage was a woman and a boy who did not make a sound. And I thought the Lord was having a joke on me. And it was the tenderest mercy I ever got. For that silent boy taught this whole valley, and taught me that quiet is not empty. Quiet is only full of the things too big and too dear to say out loud. And when the day comes that they need saying, why, they get said. And they are worth the whole 2 years of waiting. And I would wait the 2 years again this minute for one more of them. And I sat with him at the last, and my grown son Samuel sat on his other side, holding the scarred rough hand that had once cupped a small boy's cold cheek on a depot platform. And when Gideon went, it was Samuel who spoke him out of this world, my once silent son, who leaned down close to the failing ear and said, clear and steady and sure, "Rest now, Pa. We are all right. You can rest." And the same word, the first word, was the last word too, and I have thought about that every day of the years since. How the boy's whole life ran between those two. Pa cried out into a blizzard to save the man, and Pa whispered into the quiet to let him go. I am very old now, And I sit on that same porch of an evening under a lantern that my grandchildren keep lit for me the way their grandfather kept it lit for the valley. And once in a great while, a young mother comes up the bench with a child who has gone strange or silent or slow, with some grief the world has already decided makes him less. And she asks me, because she has heard the old story, whether it is true that my boy did not speak for 2 years and then saved a man's life with his first word, and I tell her it is true, every bit of it. And then I tell her the thing that 50 years have taught me, which is this: do not let them tell you the quiet child is empty, and do not let them tell you the marked one is ruined, or the slow one is simple. For the world reads a silence the way it reads everything, fast and sure and wrong, and it will name your child less before it has troubled to learn what the quiet is holding, and I am here to tell you what it is holding. It is holding the deepest water in the whole country, the kind that runs where you cannot hear it, and one day, in the one moment it is needed, and no sooner, it will come up, and it will save something you love, and the whole valley that called your child empty will stand in your kitchen ashamed. And you will know then what I have known these 50 years, that there was never anything wrong with the silence at all. We were only listening for the wrong thing. We were listening for noise, when what was coming. All along, patient and watchful and biding its one true moment, was a voice.